Hi, I'm Paybel Benbera, survivor of the genocide at AI, and this is 10 minutes, 10 minutes or less, of counter-apologetic thought. Today we are going to take a look into Saul and David, the so-called first and second kings of Israel. We will compare them and make commentary on what actually is happening in the narrative. Like most things, you cannot fully appreciate this one without taking a few steps back, allowing yourself critical distance, if you will. J-Wit, take it from here.
Well, right from the start, we see the oiling down, the smoothing over of harmonization going on with this bit of so-called biblical history. When you look at 1 Samuel 13:1, you are presented with several differing translations, which on the surface don't seem very significant, but upon closer inspection cause some alarm. It appears that the most literal translations indicate that Saul reigned 2 years over Israel, a reading which would probably be in all Bibles if it were not for Acts 13, where Paul indicates that Saul's reign lasted 40 years. Somehow, the number 40 is added to that of 2 for a total of 42 years in less literal translations, doing the work of harmonizing the two figures and smoothing out the apparent contradiction. Saul meets Samuel after a servant suggests they seek out Samuel to help them find their lost donkeys. Because although God doesn't answer and stop genocides or the horrific coltan mining in Congo, he's apparently in the business of helping individuals find lost donkeys. There, upon meeting them, Samuel is said to have privately anointed Saul king of Israel. Saul is later chosen by Lot and anointed king in a public ceremony at Mizpah. Predictability is a huge factor in relationships. If one is too unpredictable, the instability makes it very difficult to build. I want us to look long and hard at the caprice of the Yahweh character within the pages of Hebrew narrative. At the end of the day, the whim, or prerogative to be apparently arbitrary rules the day. We will see when comparing the two leaders, Saul and David, that the most significant difference in the two is the whim of their sovereign. Insecurity and fear were the motivation behind Saul offering up a sacrifice in chapter 13 and 15 of 1 Samuel. But the rationale behind his alleged misdeeds is not considered at all. He is told straight away that he will lose the dynasty due to his disobedience. He is told, behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams. David is soon anointed king while Saul is yet alive and rises among the ranks as a leader in the army. Saul is now jealous of David, who is being lauded as Saul's battle-tested better. Naturally, Saul is now jealous and acts out in ways that we would agree are an abuse of power. After attempting to kill David with his spear, he then simply assigns him to the front line of battle in 1 Samuel 18, not unlike God, who occasionally employs others to do his dirty work, as in 1 Kings 22, where God sends a lying spirit, keeping his hands clean, like a mob boss insulating himself from justice. This is interesting because Saul obviously fails, but after the death of Saul, while in power, David employs this very tactic to knock off the husband off his paramour Bathsheba. In 2 Samuel 12, after David has secured the kingdom following Saul's death and 4 chapters after having been promised an everlasting dynasty, he sends Uriah, one of his soldiers, off to be killed so he can cover the scandal of having slept with his wife. Let's stop and consider what is going on here. Saul, who out of fear offered up sacrifices to keep his army present in the face of the threat of ambush from the Philistines, is immediately told he will lose the kingship and be replaced by another, who is, quote, better than him, unquote. But he is replaced by one who is an adulterous murderer who was promised an everlasting dynasty off the rip. Let us contrast Saul's moral failings prior to being told his house will lose the kingship with those of David. Saul, allowing anxiety to get the best of him, offers up a sacrifice to keep the army with him in Gilgal, and later allows some of his soldiers to keep the booty of war, allegedly for sacrifice for the sake of morale. David, God's Nepo baby, is awarded the kingdom more or less in front of the current king, a thing which would surely incite jealousy, and given promises of an eternal dynasty only to shortly thereafter kill a soldier after impregnating that same man's wife. What we see in the text is an insecure and fearful man making rash decisions which result in harsh and permanent judgments over against a beneficiary of favoritism. There really does seem to be a case of God's favorites in the text. The question which may arise from this when examined critically is, how can we relate to someone who behaves this arbitrarily? Is the narrative simply one designed to emphasize the freedom of God to choose who will get the better deal? If this is the case, why is the narrative even necessary? I can imagine that it is one thing to live under rule which varies based on the arbitrary preference of a ruler, but to emphasize such in a narrative just seems a bit cruel. There are those who will dismiss the point of this short essay as too reductive. They may point out that Saul's insanity and jealousy feature quite a bit in the text. Look at how he hunts David to kill him, they may say. I want to note here that all of this happens after Saul is told the kingdom will be taken from him due to disobedience. God also promises David a sweet deal in advance of his misdeeds. It won't suffice to say, that is it, he promised, and was bound to his words uttered before David went off the rails. The reason this does not work is that many Christians believe God to be omniscient, that is to say, he is aware of future events. If God punishes Saul because of his character and the deeds we see within the text leading to this punishment stem from anxiety and insecurity and never outright murder, how is it that David is considered his moral better and awarded the kingdom on the basis of this appraisal? For those who would emphasize the necessity of the lack of merit in the equation of grace, you must deal with this statement from 1 Samuel 15. The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you, that is Saul, this day, and has given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you. And also, the glory of Israel will not lie or have regret, for he is not a man, that he should have regret. I think it is also great to follow that quote up with this one from Genesis 6. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. But lest I digress too long, the merit-based choice of David is unavoidable in 1 Samuel 15. When we look at this, does it not appear a bit curious that improper sacrifice and the lack of committing a hasty genocide are considered worse than sleeping with a man's wife, impregnating her, and having the husband killed? These are questions that needn't be answered right away, but this is instability on the level of Trumpian tariffs. You cannot build a relationship on the basis of this arbitrariness. I should perhaps modify that last statement. You can build a relationship with someone like this, but there will be no basis for assurance. This is also an interesting read for those who would imply that we need the Bible as a foundation for our moral absolutes. Again, sure, they can say that God makes the rules, but when you see this kind of caprice within the narrative, how does this ground anything? Apparently, to hesitate in genocide and to not offer up animals in sacrifice in the proper manner is worse than the act of killing someone's spouse because you coerced them into sex and impregnated them. There is no getting around this because God says to Saul via Samuel that David was better than him. The two both repented of their behavior, Saul even going as far as beseeching Samuel while grabbing his robe which was rent, to which Samuel replied, "The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you this day and has given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you." Better how? Again, I would like to thank you for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment, and share, as I hope to make this channel a resource for others who find themselves on a similar journey.